In the case of spending, there was actually specific or related discussion about this in Congress when the director of the Office of Management and Budget, who was my boss as well as the boss of the regulatory folks, went to Congress. She got comments on how poor some of the allocation was for certain resilience spending, climate resilience spending, particularly from folks in California. And her response was, we're working on it. And this distributional analysis was what we were doing. Those members of Congress from California were talking about something that had also appeared in the news. So there were a couple of articles in Politico, a politics website, that described, again, funding from FEMA, our emergency agency. This emergency agency responds after the fact to emergencies, but it also proactively provides billions of dollars a year to promote resilience, to build a levee to protect against a flood or something like that. And what these articles in Politico had shown is that the funds were disproportionately going to wealthy areas. So this is a sense in which whatever was going on, the efficiency-based way, or in any case, what was going on, seemed to not really be neutral. It seemed to be benefiting the rich at the expense of more disadvantaged neighborhoods. So this is a way in which it didn't seem like the goal was to tilt the playing field toward the poor through the revisions, was rather to have a level playing field. And so we felt like we had a strong mandate here, that there was public outrage at the way some of the grants were being administered on the basis of these rules, and that we should make a change on the basis of just having a level playing field. So we made these changes, and we emphasized that you can use distributional weighting. You could also do something that in some cases would be similar to distributional weighting, but you could also just alternatively, cleanse willingness to pay of the impacts of income. So, for example, when you're building a levee to protect against homes, one of the main benefits is the value of those homes. Richer people are going to tend to live in larger, more expensive, more valuable homes. So it will tend to be the case that if you're doing efficiency-based benefit cost analysis, more money is going to be directed towards rich places. So you could use distributional weighting. You could also just assume a uniform value of homes across the country, or you could look at the actual value of homes and then, weight them by the population, or weight them by income, inverse weight by income, which would result in a similar outcome in many cases. And in any case, though, it's kind of probably a leveling the playing field kind of mentality. The places of real need were often real need in welfare terms. We're often not getting what was needed. So another thing to note about, I guess I should talk about how benefit cost analysis works in the United States for spending. Typically, the way that it works, and not always, is that you create a benefit cost ratio, and then if benefits are above costs, so you have a benefit cost ratio above 1, then you're in the money, and typically the agency can then proceed. For some agencies, it's more valuable to be further above 1, but that's not necessarily the case. So part of what the distributional weighting was doing, or income cleansing was doing, or would be doing, would be ensuring that there are projects that are eligible for funding, having a benefit cost ratio above 1 in places where people are very needy and thus do not have high measured benefits in dollar terms owing to their poverty. In terms of the weighting, so this was a process that began on the regulatory side long before I joined at the beginning of the administration. We throughout were committed to being consistent between spending and regulations as a matter of good government. That makes sense, and science and economics are the same. In some cases, there are small differences in the basis of different contexts on the ground where that would justify it. So those numbers came about as part of an exhaustive review of the literature on how to measure the declining marginal utility of income. That came partly from risk aversion, came partly from hedonic studies, and this is laid out in the preamble to the regulatory guidance. And look, this is an averaging of a large number of studies, and with time, this stuff could be honed, but it was the best read that we could make of the large amounts of available evidence out there in terms of the weights that we could propose. Finally, it's important to note, and I do not know what you all are thinking, for both regulations and spending, the distributional weights are optional. They are not mandatory. And that was done because for a variety of reasons, including that in some cases that may not be statutorily permitted. So we cannot have guidance that is contrary to the statute. And it's also a reasonable first step, making it optional and then just letting agencies like FEMA try it out. And another approach, this is not an approach to collecting information, but one thought for you in developing it is that optional weights are a possibility. Like you may not have to use weights at all. You don't necessarily have to use these weights. That could be a possible way to go. As part of this, of course, we were inspired by the UK Green Book, which has long had distributional weights as their guidance. As I read it in the UK, it's actually mandatory guidance. I am unaware of anyone demonstrating that the UK has ever used these weights. If you all have other evidence there, that would be useful to share with the world when that has been used, when it's been used in the UK, and when it's been useful. Because it's been in the Green Book for many, many years. And my literature review has not shown any documentation of its use.
On equity, I think you can look across the American political spectrum, and people are worried about distribution, and about who's winning and who's losing, like on any given policy. I think one of the drawbacks to the U.S. regulatory system, but I actually think this is common in all countries as best I know, is when a regulation is passed, there is no organization that is trying to ensure that it's completely harmonized with every other regulation that's ever been passed, and thinking about, well, like on the margin, like no one's looking, like is it always the same group of people who are like kind of benefiting from a regulation and always the same group of people who are kind of losing? I think the philosophy has always been like it comes out in the wash. like some regulations benefit some people more than others. Like we know every regulation is going to benefit someone a little bit more. Like it's a potential Pareto improvement. It's not an actual, Sen has what he says about this, and I think Sen has like some legitimate critiques of potential Pareto, but like it's a potential Pareto improvement. And so the question then is like, is it coming out in the wash? And I think it's given the way that we have done regulation, given the machinery and the amount of regulation that's done in a large country, whether it's France or the US, it's like hard to like summarize the incidents. And the incidents, very rarely was incidence ever calculated in benefit cost, even though it's part of the 2003 A3 suggests doing it, right? It's just, never really been enforced. And so there's not even a database to go look at. Maybe like an interesting project using like large language modeling and AI would actually be to try and go do this now. The goal of doing benefit cost analysis is about structuring decisions when you're doing regulation and trying to come up with like an internally consistent way of thinking through the problem of when is a regulation merited, when does a regulation do more good than harm, because we know regulations distort markets, and markets are pretty good at allocating a lot of things like toothpaste, right? Clear owner, like private goods, clear property rights, everybody understands what they are. Not so good at things that people don't have any experience buying and selling and are, require collective action, like all of the typical economic problems. So I think the challenge then was to introduce some flexibility to different ways at getting at different distributional impacts. And so my interpretation of what was in the revisions was like trying to elevate the need to do something and to consider distributional impacts, and then providing a couple different ways that agencies might think about that, rather than saying you will weight this way or you will weight that way. And I think ultimately, just like in econometrics, it's really nice when things can whether or not something passes a benefit cost analysis is actually robust to the set of weightings you might throw at it, right? And so I think that the question then, in the ideal world, is like, if it's robust to the weightings, we don't have to worry about it. If it's not robust, then maybe we need to do more work and understand why.
The result in the US ended up being fairly controversial in some quarters. Criticisms in the Wall Street Journal editorial page. CPAC, a leading conservative advocacy group, recently, toward the beginning of the Trump administration, had a list of their concerns with the output of the Biden administration. A list of several things. The number one on their list was adding distributional considerations to benefit cost analysis. So I think it's worth considering views of the public in addition to views of academics. This is, as you all understand, but as well or better than I do, this is not a purely technical question. It's to some extent a question of values, and so it's worth being attentive to that. We're proud of what we did. We think it's consistent with kind of the best economics, the best science, but it's worth considering opposition as well.